How did a spice run change the course of history? Centuries ago, Christopher Columbus and his crew set sail to find a new route to the Spice Islands near Asia. They hoped to bring back valuable goods like pepper and cinnamon to make their food taste better. Not only were they seeking riches, but they also wanted to spread their religion. Kings and queens like Queen Isabella of Spain supported these voyages to spread Christianity to new lands. Instead, they stumbled upon new territories, such as the Caribbean islands and the Americas. This unexpected discovery opened up opportunities for trade, leading to the development of the Atlantic economy, a vast system of exchange connecting continents. This exchange of plants, animals, and diseases between the Old World and the New World is known as the Columbian Exchange. For example, potatoes and maize were brought to Europe, while horses and cattle were introduced to the Americas. But how are these long voyages possible? New tools like the compass, which always pointed north, helped sailors find their way across the open seas. Other devices like the astrolabe allowed sailors to determine their position by the stars. Explorers like Prince Henry of Portugal supported these voyages by funding them and establishing schools for sailors, such as the navigation school at Sagre. Better ships like the Caravel, designed with special sails called lateen sails, allowed sailors to travel farther than before. The wealth gained from trade encouraged further innovations, like the development of the galleon, a larger ship capable of carrying more cargo. With these advancements, explorers began new trade routes that would change the world, such as Vasco da Gama's voyage to India around the Cape of Good Hope. Imagine a giant triangle connecting Europe, Africa, and the Americas. This is known as the triangular trade. European merchants loaded ships with goods like guns, cloth, and metal items such as brass bracelets and iron bars. They sailed to Africa and traded these items for enslaved Africans from kingdoms like Dahomey and Ashanti. Not only Britain, but other European countries like Portugal, Spain, France, and the Netherlands were involved in this trade. Portuguese explorers like Vasco da Gama opened sea routes to Africa and Asia for this trade. Traders like John Hawkins, an English sea captain, took part in these exchanges along the West African coast. Companies like the Dutch East India Company, established in 1602, and the Virginia Company, founded in 1606, were joint stock companies that allowed investors to pool their money to fund voyages and colonies, spreading the risk and profits among many people. 12 million Africans were taken to the Americas as slaves. They were forced to work on plantations growing cash crops, crops grown to be sold for profit rather than used by the growers. For example, in Barbados, vast sugar plantations were established, while in Virginia, tobacco became the main crop. The journey across the Atlantic, called the Middle Passage, was harsh. Enslaved Africans were packed into ships like the Brooks, with little food or water. Olaudah Aquino later wrote about the terrible conditions on these ships in his autobiography. Many died from disease and poor treatment, with mortality rates estimated between 15 and 20%. The Virginia Slave Codes of 1705 defined the status of slaves and the rights of masters. These laws limited the rights of enslaved Africans and gave owners complete control over them. In Spanish colonies, encomienda forced Native Americans to work for Spanish, for protection, and Christian teachings, as seen in the exploitation of the Taino people in Hispaniola by settlers like Bartolomé de las Casas, who later became an advocate for Native American rights. In Africa, the slave trade had a big impact. Families were torn apart when individuals like men from the Congo Kingdom were captured and sold. Communities lost many young and strong people, such as warriors and farmers essential for local economies. This loss hurt societies and economies, making it hard for these communities to grow. Despite these hardships, enslaved Africans found ways to resist. Some organized uprisings on ships or plantations. For example, in 1839, the slaves on the ship Amistad revolted and tried to sail back to Africa. Leaders like Toussaint Louverture would later lead successful revolts in places like Haiti, leading to the Haitian Revolution in 1791. Others ran away to form hidden communities called Maroons, such as the communities established in the mountains of Jamaica by escaped slaves. In these places, they lived free from slavery. Explorers like Hernan Cortés and Jacques Cartier traded with American Indians. Cortés conquered the Aztec Empire in present-day Mexico. Cartier explored the St. Lawrence River in Canada and traded with the Iroquois people. Trade introduced horses to American Indians. The Plains Indians, such as the Sioux and Cheyenne, adopted the horse and transformed their way of life into nomadic buffalo hunting. Europeans brought animals like pigs, cows, and sheep to the Americas. These animals changed the way people lived and farmed, such as in the Spanish missions in California, where cattle ranching became important. Europeans received new crops like corn, potatoes, and tomatoes. Ideas and customs were exchanged as well. European religions, particularly Catholicism, spread to the Americas through missions established by priests like Junipero Serra in California. Native American words and foods became part of European culture. For instance, words like canoe, hammock, and barbecue entered European languages. The Columbian Exchange led to significant changes in diets and lifestyles on both sides of the Atlantic. Can you imagine life without chocolate or potatoes? These exchanges blended cultures in many ways. For example, the mixing of European, African, and Native American peoples led to new populations, such as the Mestizo people in Latin America, who have both European and Native American ancestry, as seen in countries like Mexico. New languages formed, mixing words from different tongues, like Haitian Creole, which blends French and African languages. Foods like chili peppers and chocolate became popular in Europe, with chocolate becoming a favorite in Spain after being introduced by explorers like Hernan Cortez. Wheat and rice were brought to the Americas, leading to new dishes like arroz con pollo, rice with chicken, in Latin America. African influences also appeared in music, dance, and storytelling, creating rich cultural traditions that still exist today, such as samba music in Brazil and spirituals in the United States. However, not all exchanges were positive. American Indians suffered from diseases brought by Europeans. Diseases like smallpox greatly reduced populations. The Taino people in the Caribbean were greatly affected. It's estimated that their population declined from hundreds of thousands to just a few thousand within decades of contact. Europeans also faced new illnesses like syphilis from the Americas. This disease spread in Europe and caused health problems, affecting people from all social classes, including kings like Henry VIII of England. In Spanish colonies, labor systems like the encomienda forced Native Americans to work under harsh conditions, leading to suffering and death. For example, in the silver mines of Potosi in present-day Bolivia, many indigenous workers died due to brutal working conditions. Colonists like Sir Walter Raleigh established large farms to grow sugar, cotton, and tobacco. Raleigh attempted to establish the Roanoke colony in present-day North Carolina, though it failed. Sugar, produced in places like the Caribbean islands of Barbados and Jamaica, became a popular sweetener in tea and pastries. Tobacco, cultivated in Virginia by colonists like John Rolfe, became a common habit, with smoking and snuff-taking becoming widespread. The introduction of these cash crops led to the growth of plantation economies in the colonies. These new goods flooded European markets, leading to increased wealth. However, the influx of gold and silver from the Americas, such as the vast amounts of silver mined at Potosi, also caused inflation in Spain during the 16th century, known as the Price Revolution, where money lost value and prices rose. This affected many people in Europe, especially the poor, who struggled with higher costs of living. The wealth from the colonies fueled economic growth and funded technological advancements, such as improvements in shipbuilding and manufacturing, including the development of the galleon ship and advances in textile production. As more people in Europe wanted these goods, the colonies produced more. It's like when a new smartphone becomes popular, and factories produce millions of them to meet demand. The more people wanted, the more the colonies supplied. To meet this growing demand, they needed more labor, so they brought more enslaved people from Africa, increasing the transatlantic slave trade significantly in the 18th century. European farming methods changed the land in the Americas. Colonists like John Smith in Jamestown cleared forests to plant crops like tobacco. This deforestation affected the soil and native plants and animals, leading to erosion and loss of habitats for species like the passenger pigeon. Over time, these farming practices led to deforestation and soil exhaustion, making the land less fertile. The introduction of non-native animals like pigs and cattle also changed ecosystems. For example, pigs brought by Hernando de Soto in the southeastern United States multiplied rapidly, competing with native species and damaging crops. The environmental impact of colonization was significant, altering landscapes and displacing wildlife. The British government wanted to control its colonies to increase its wealth. This system, called mercantilism, is like a parent who keeps all the money earned from a family business, not letting others benefit. Mercantilism was an economic theory that said a country's power depended on its wealth. The idea was to export more goods than you import, gaining gold and silver. Colonies existed to benefit the mother country by providing raw materials like cotton and buying manufactured goods like textiles. Britain enforced strict trade rules. Colonies had to trade only with Britain. They passed laws like the Navigation Acts in 1651, which required colonists to use British ships and restricted them from trading with other nations like the Dutch. Examples of these laws are the Sugar Act of 1764, taxing sugar and molasses, and the Stamp Act of 1765, taxing printed materials like newspapers and legal documents. Colonists were angry because they had no say in making these laws, coining the phrase no taxation without representation. Some turned to smuggling to avoid taxes, like John Hancock, who smuggled goods into Massachusetts. The seas became a place of conflict, with pirates and privateers disrupting trade. Figures like Sir Francis Drake acted as privateers, attacking Spanish ships like the Cacafuego with the support of the English crown. European powers often used legal documents and theories to justify taking over new lands. The doctrine of discovery, established by papal bulls such as Inter Caetera in 1493, said that any land not ruled by Christians could be claimed by Christian rulers. This gave them a reason to colonize and convert native peoples. Leaders like Samuel Adams did not speak out for the natives, but they spoke out against unfair taxes, organizing groups like the Sons of Liberty. However, new ideas were emerging. Thinkers like Adam Smith argued for capitalism, where markets should be free from government control. In his book, The Wealth of Nations, published in 1776, Smith promoted the idea of the invisible hand guiding the economy. This would later influence economies around the world. Conflicts with colonists and American Indians made it hard to enforce these rules. Colonists wanted more freedom. They smuggled goods to other countries and protested British taxes. Events like the Boston Tea Party in 1773, where colonists dressed as Mohawk Indians dumped 342 chests of tea into Boston Harbor, showed their anger. These actions planted seeds for future independence movements, leading to the First Continental Congress in 1774. Wealth from the colonies made European countries rich. This led to rivalries and wars over control. Britain and France fought in the 7 Years' War from 1756 to 1763 to decide who would control large parts of North America. The war ended with the Treaty of Paris, where France ceded much of its territory to Britain. Other European nations, like Spain and the Netherlands, also competed for colonies and trade. Spain controlled much of South America and parts of North America, including Florida and California, while the Dutch established colonies and trading posts in the Caribbean, Africa, and New Amsterdam, now New York City. The transatlantic trade connected with other global trade networks, such as the Indian Ocean trade, influencing economies around the world. For example, silver from the Americas was traded to China in exchange for silk and porcelain. All these events led to big changes like the American Revolution. The colonies fought for and won independence from Britain after battles like the Battle of Yorktown in 1781. Leaders like George Washington played key roles in this struggle as commander-in-chief of the Continental Army. After independence, the United States adopted new economic ideas that favored free trade and capitalism, reflected in policies like Alexander Hamilton's financial plan. This shift away from mercantilism allowed for more economic growth. Later, movements to end slavery gained strength. People like William Wilberforce in Britain worked to end the slave trade, leading to the Slave Trade Act of 1807, which abolished the slave trade in the British Empire, and later the Slavery Abolition Act of 1833, which ended slavery itself in most British territories. So the simple search for spices didn't just flavor food, it spiced up the entire world. Explorers like Christopher Columbus set out to make their meals tastier, but ended up changing history. Not only did the quest for spices and riches change the world, but so did the desire to spread beliefs and cultures. The voyages of these explorers connected distant lands, for better or worse, shaping the world we know today. From the blending of cultures, like the creation of Creole languages, to the rise of new economic systems, such as capitalism, their journeys had far-reaching effects. Next time you sprinkle pepper on your food, remember that it once drove explorers to cross oceans and forever altered the course of history. Who knew that a quest for flavor and faith could lead to such monumental changes?